I'm Karl, 32 years old, and the younger brother of Jessica. Our relationship has always been complicated, like walking through a minefield of expectations and comparisons. When I received her invitation to her big promotion party, I felt a mix of pride and apprehension. I never expected that night would become the most humiliating and then surprisingly transformative evening of my adult life. Before I continue with this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if family drama stories resonate with you. Growing up, the 5-year age gap between Jessica and me felt more like 20. From the moment she brought home her first perfect report card, Jessica became the golden child of our family. Our parents never explicitly said it, but their eyes revealed everything. When they looked at Jessica, they saw limitless potential. When they looked at me, they saw uncertainty. I wasn't a bad student. In fact, my teachers often commented on my creativity and unique way of looking at the world. But in our household, creativity took a backseat to academic achievement. Jessica excelled in mathematics and science, subjects that made my brain feel like it was wading through molasses. While she competed in debate tournaments and science fairs, I spent hours in my room drawing and creating stories. My parents would nod politely when I showed them my artwork, but they never displayed it alongside Jessica's trophies and certificates. "Your sister is going places," my dad would often say during dinner, pointing his fork at Jessica. "Full scholarship offers already, and she's only a sophomore." The unspoken comparison hung in the air like a storm cloud. I was only 11 at the time, but I understood what wasn't being said. Why couldn't I be more like her? By the time I entered middle school, Jessica was already a local legend. Teachers would look at my last name on the roster, and their eyes would light up. "Another Jackson. Are you Jessica's brother?" The question always filled me with a mix of pride and dread. Yes, I was related to the brilliant Jessica Jackson. No, I wasn't going to win the state math competition or graduate 2 years early. Jessica seemed to thrive on being the family superstar. When I finally found my niche in art class and won a district competition in 7th grade, Jessica managed to get accepted to a prestigious summer program at Stanford the same week. My achievement became a footnote at the dinner table, while our parents spent hours discussing Jessica's academic trajectory. "Maybe you could use your drawing to help you study," Jessica suggested once, flipping through my sketchbook without really looking at it. "Like make diagrams of chemical reactions or something useful." At 14, I didn't have the words to explain that art wasn't just a tool for me, it was a language of its own. Our teenage years only widened the gap. Jessica became class president, valedictorian, and the kind of student colleges fight over. I maintained decent grades, but focused more on developing my artistic skills. The art teacher let me spend lunch periods in the studio, working on projects that gave me a sense of purpose. Jessica collected friends like trading cards, always surrounded by a group of equally ambitious peers. I had a smaller circle, other creative types who understood that success didn't always look like a 4 GPA. When college application season arrived, Jessica received acceptance letters from Ivy League schools and top universities across the country. My parents threw her a party when she decided on Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania. There was no question about her path. She was destined for corporate success. My announcement that I wanted to attend the state art school was met with concerned glances. "Are you sure that's practical?" my mother asked, worry lines creasing her forehead. "What kind of job will you get with an art degree?" Jessica didn't help matters. "You're going to spend 4 years learning to draw," she asked with a laugh. "Good luck paying off those student loans with commissions." Despite the lack of enthusiasm, I enrolled in the visual arts program, focusing on graphic design and digital art. My parents reluctantly paid my tuition, though they frequently mentioned how much cheaper it was than Jessica's prestigious business school. Small victories, I guess. College gave me space to breathe, to exist outside of Jessica's shadow. I flourished in the creative environment, making friends who valued my perspective and talents. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Jessica and I rarely spoke during those years. Our paths had diverged so completely that we had little in common anymore. When we did see each other during holidays, she would dominate conversations with stories about internships at Fortune 500 companies and networking events with industry leaders. If I tried to share news about my projects or exhibitions, she would listen for about 30 seconds before steering the conversation back to her world. "That's nice," she would say, patting my arm. "But you should hear about this marketing campaign I helped develop." The VP of Operations personally complimented my work. After graduation, Jessica landed a position at Williams & Stone, a major marketing firm in Chicago. Within 3 years, she had her own office and a team reporting to her. Her trajectory was exactly what our parents had always envisioned. I took a different route, building a freelance career in graphic design. The early years were tough, filled with ramen dinners and late nights hunting for clients. Jessica didn't hesitate to point out the contrast in our lives during family gatherings. "Still working from your apartment?" she asked one Christmas, the question wrapped in false concern. "I could put in a word for you at Williams & Stone. They're always looking for people in the creative department. You'd have to start at the bottom, of course." I declined her offer, not willing to place myself directly under her influence. By my late 20s, I had built a modest but stable client base. I wasn't making Jessica-level money, but I was doing work I loved and gradually making a name for myself in certain design circles. My apartment doubled as my studio, and while it wasn't luxurious, it was filled with art and light and felt authentically mine. Our parents still made comparisons, of course. "Jessica just bought a condo in Lincoln Park," my mother would inform me during our weekly calls. Or, "Jessica is dating a doctor now. Such a nice young man." The subtext was always the same. When would I catch up? What Jessica and my parents didn't understand was that I wasn't trying to follow her path. Success for me looked different. I measured it in creative fulfillment, in the relationships I built, in the freedom to choose projects that excited me. But explaining this to a family that valued prestige and financial achievement felt futile. By the time Jessica reached her early 30s, she had become director of marketing at Williams & Stone. Our contact had dwindled to obligatory birthday texts and occasional group family calls. I had accepted that we would never be close, that the competitive dynamic established in childhood had permanently shaped our relationship. Then came the invitation to her promotion party, and everything changed. The call from Jessica came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, interrupting my work on a branding project for a local craft brewery. I almost let it go to voicemail, a habit I'd developed to maintain focus during work hours. But something made me pick up on the third ring. "Karl," she said, her voice crisp and professional as always. "How are you?" "I'm good," I replied, surprised by the contact. We hadn't spoken since Christmas, nearly 3 months earlier. "What's up?" "I wanted to let you know I've been promoted to Executive Director of Marketing," she announced without preamble. There was no question in my mind that I was far down her list of people to inform, an obligation call rather than a genuine desire to share good news. "That's great, Jess. Congratulations." I meant it despite our complicated relationship. Jessica worked hard and was genuinely talented at what she did. "The company is throwing a party next Friday at Bellini's. 7 o'clock. Her tone was matter-of-fact, not quite an invitation. "You should come. Mom and Dad can't make it from Arizona, so it would be good to have some family there." The reluctance in her voice was unmistakable. I was clearly a backup option, better than having no family representation at all. "I'll check my schedule," I said, though we both knew I would go. Duty and guilt were powerful motivators in our family. "Great. Business casual. I'll put your name on the list." And with that, she was gone, not bothering with the usual social niceties that might pad such a conversation. I sat back in my chair, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to text back that I was too busy, that a major project had just come in and required my full attention. It wouldn't even be a complete lie, as my schedule was indeed filling up with spring clients. But another part of me, the part that still hoped for reconciliation, for some sign that Jessica saw me as more than her disappointing younger brother, wanted to go. Maybe this was an olive branch of sorts. Maybe in her moment of professional triumph, she was reaching out to heal old wounds. I spent the next several days wavering between attendance and excuses. My friend Thomas listened patiently to my deliberations over beers on Thursday night. "She's your sister," he pointed out, ever the voice of simple reason. "And it sounds like a fancy party with free food and drinks. What's the worst that could happen?" I laughed, but it was hollow. "You don't know Jessica. She has this way of making me feel about 2 inches tall, even when she's supposedly being nice." Thomas shrugged. "So you feel small for an evening, eat some expensive appetizers, and leave early. At least you showed up. Isn't that what family does?" He was right, of course. For all our differences and the emotional baggage between us, Jessica was my only sibling. If there was any chance of improving our relationship, I needed to make the effort. The decision made, I found myself unexpectedly anxious about what to wear. My usual work attire consisted of jeans and button-ups, occasionally a blazer for client meetings. Would that be business casual enough for Jessica's corporate crowd? After trying on virtually every combination in my wardrobe, I settled on my newest dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and my one good blazer. Professional enough without looking like I was trying too hard. Finding a gift proved equally challenging. What do you buy for someone who makes 3 times your salary and considers your career choices questionable at best? After wandering through several stores and dismissing options as either too cheap, too personal, or too generic, I finally decided on a leather portfolio embossed with her initials. It was elegant and professional, something she might actually use, and it played to her corporate identity without being completely impersonal. The night before the party, I found myself rehearsing potential conversations. "Congratulations on your promotion. The company clearly values your contributions." Too formal. "Way to go on the big promotion, sis." Too casual and unlike anything I would actually say. "I'm really proud of what you've accomplished, Jessica." Too vulnerable, setting myself up for dismissal. In the end, I decided to play it by ear, to read the room and Jessica's mood before committing to any particular approach. If she was warm and inclusive, I would respond in kind. If she was distant and professional, I would match her tone and make a graceful early exit. Friday arrived, and with it a growing sense of unease. I tried to focus on work, but found myself checking the time every 15 minutes. At 3:00, I gave up and closed my laptop. A walk would clear my head, and I could use the extra time to pick up Jessica's gift from the stationery store where I'd ordered the portfolio. As I strolled through my neighborhood, I called Thomas for a final pep talk. "Just remember, this isn't high school," he advised. "You're a successful professional in your own right. You belong at that party just as much as anyone else." "I know," I sighed. But knowing something intellectually doesn't always translate to feeling it emotionally. "Then fake it," Thomas said simply. "Stand tall, speak confidently, and don't let her see any doubt. You've built something real, Karl. Your work is good. You have clients who value you. You don't need Jessica's approval anymore." I thanked him for the encouragement and promised to text him updates throughout the evening. As supportive as Thomas was, we both knew that family dynamics run deep. Logical arguments about self-worth rarely stand a chance against decades of established patterns. By 6 o'clock, I was showered, dressed, and sitting in the back of a rideshare, gift-wrapped portfolio on my lap, heading toward Bellini's. The restaurant was in the heart of downtown Chicago, known for its upscale Italian cuisine and elegant atmosphere. As the car navigated through Friday evening traffic, I practiced deep breathing techniques to calm my nerves. "I can do this," I told myself. "One evening. A few hours at most. Smile, be polite, congratulate Jessica, make minimal small talk with her colleagues, and leave by 9. Simple enough." The car pulled up to the restaurant, its facade illuminated by tasteful lighting. A small sign by the entrance indicated that the second floor was reserved for a private event. Jessica's event. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, straightening my blazer, I made a decision. Tonight, I would not be the awkward little brother seeking approval. Tonight, I would be Karl Jackson, professional graphic designer, attending his sister's work function as an equal. With that resolution firmly in mind, I walked through the door, unaware that the evening ahead would change our relationship forever. Bellini's second floor had been transformed for the occasion. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over the space, highlighting floral arrangements in the company colors. A jazz trio played in one corner, providing an elegant soundtrack without overwhelming conversation. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, expertly navigating through clusters of well-dressed professionals. I scanned the room for Jessica, finally spotting her near the bar, surrounded by a small group hanging on her every word. She looked the part of the successful executive in a tailored navy dress, her dark hair styled in a sleek updo, laughing confidently as she finished what was clearly the punchline of a story. Taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, I steeled myself and approached the group. Jessica noticed me when I was a few steps away, her smile faltering almost imperceptibly before regaining its professional polish. "Karl," she said, reaching out to pat my shoulder rather than offering a hug. "You made it." "Congratulations on the promotion," I replied, holding out the wrapped portfolio. "I brought you something." She took the gift with a quick thanks before immediately turning to the group. "Everyone, this is my brother, just my brother, not my brother Karl," as if my name was an unnecessary detail. "Karl, these are some colleagues from the creative department." I shook hands with the group, introducing myself properly. "Karl Jackson, graphic designer." "Great to meet you all." "Jackson," one of the men repeated, glancing between Jessica and me. "I would never have guessed you two were siblings." Jessica laughed. "Karl took after our mother's side of the family." It was an innocuous comment on the surface, but I caught the subtle implication. Our mother's side had no notable achievements, no professionals or academics, mostly blue-collar workers and homemakers. By contrast, our father's side boasted doctors, lawyers, and business executives, Jessica's aspirational peer group. "How long have you been with Williams and Stone?" I asked the group, shifting attention away from family comparisons. As they answered, I noticed Jessica drifting away, moving to greet new arrivals. The dismissal was clear, but I was determined to make the best of the evening. The creative team members were actually quite friendly, showing genuine interest when I described some of my recent projects. "Freelance must be so freeing," one woman commented. "No office politics, no 9-to-5 grind." "It has its challenges," I admitted. "Irregular income, no benefits package. But the creative freedom makes up for it." "Jessica mentioned you do some kind of art?" another asked, the question phrased in a way that suggested Jessica had been vague about my profession. "Graphic design and digital illustration," I clarified. "Brand identity, marketing materials, web design, that sort of thing." I pulled out my phone to show them my portfolio website. Their appreciative comments bolstered my confidence, though I couldn't help wondering what exactly Jessica had told her colleagues about me. As the evening progressed, I noticed something odd. Whenever Jessica introduced me to someone, there was a strange undertone to her voice when she said, "my brother," a subtle emphasis that seemed to convey some private meaning. More disturbing were the reactions, sympathetic looks or quickly masked surprise, as if they'd heard something about me beforehand. During a conversation with Jessica's assistant, the young woman let something slip. "It's so nice you could come support your sister." She mentioned you don't usually attend corporate events. "Did she?" I replied carefully. "I don't get many invitations to them, to be honest." "Oh," the assistant looked flustered. "I just thought, because of your situation, that you might find them uncomfortable." "My situation?" Before I could ask for clarification, Jessica appeared and steered her assistant away, claiming she needed help with something urgent. I was left wondering what narrative Jessica had been spinning about my life. The mystery deepened when I approached the bar for a refill and overheard a conversation that abruptly halted as I drew near. The speakers exchanged meaningful glances before asking if I was enjoying the party. It was like being back in high school, aware that people were talking about you but not knowing exactly what they were saying. The difference was that, as an adult, I found it more irritating than hurtful. What was Jessica playing at? The answer began to take shape when I was introduced to Marcus Williams, the CEO of Williams and Stone. A tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes, he approached me directly rather than waiting for Jessica to make introductions. "You must be Karl," he said, extending his hand. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Surprised by his warmth, I shook his hand firmly. "Likewise, though I'm not sure why I'd be on your radar." Marcus smiled. "Jessica mentioned you work in design. I always make a point of connecting with creative professionals. They see the world differently than us business types." We fell into an easy conversation about design trends and the balance between aesthetics and functionality. Marcus was surprisingly knowledgeable, asking insightful questions about my process and philosophy. "Do you have a card?" he asked after several minutes of engaging discussion. "We occasionally hire freelancers for special projects." I handed him my business card, trying not to appear too eager. A client like Williams and Stone would be a significant addition to my portfolio. "I'll check out your website," he promised, tucking the card into his jacket pocket. "We might have something coming up that would suit your style." From across the room, I caught Jessica watching our interaction, her expression difficult to read. When Marcus was called away to greet other guests, she quickly materialized at my side. "I see you met Marcus," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "He seems great," I replied. "Very down-to-earth for a CEO." Jessica sipped her champagne. "He's just being polite. We have an entire creative department. We don't need to outsource design work." The dismissal stung, but I refused to show it. Of course. Still, it was nice of him to take an interest. As the evening wore on, Jessica began telling stories about our childhood to various groups, always with me on the periphery of the conversation. On the surface, they were harmless anecdotes, but each contained a subtle barb. Karl was always daydreaming as a child. Mom used to say she could call his name 10 times, and he wouldn't hear because he was off in his own little world. "Remember that science fair project that caught fire?" Karl was so creative, but not always practical. "My brother took the scenic route through college." 5.5 years, wasn't it, Karl? He needed time to find himself. Each story elicited polite laughter, with glances in my direction that ranged from amused to pitying. I maintained a smile, occasionally adding self-deprecating comments to seem like a good sport, all while wondering why Jessica felt the need to diminish me on her big night. The answer came shortly after dinner was served, when the formal speeches began. And with them, the moment that would change everything. The dinner portion of the evening had been pleasant enough. I'd been seated at a table with marketing associates, away from Jessica, who occupied a place of honor near the front with senior executives. The food was excellent, the wine flowed freely, and my table companions were surprisingly easy to talk to once they discovered I wasn't a corporate competitor or potential networking opportunity. As dessert plates were being cleared, Marcus Williams rose and approached the small podium set up near the jazz trio. The music faded, conversations quieted, and all attention turned to the CEO. "What a pleasure it is to celebrate Jessica Jackson's well-deserved promotion to Executive Director of Marketing," he began, his voice warm and authoritative. "In the 5 years Jessica has been with Williams and Stone, she has consistently demonstrated the vision, drive, and strategic thinking that exemplify our company values." He continued with specific praise for Jessica's achievements, mentioning campaigns she had spearheaded and clients she had secured. I listened with genuine pride, despite the complicated feelings between us. My sister was undeniably good at what she did. When Marcus finished his remarks, he invited Jessica to say a few words. She rose gracefully, accepting enthusiastic applause as she took her place at the podium. Her poised smile reminded me of her valedictorian speech, confident and slightly rehearsed. "Thank you, Marcus, for those kind words and for this incredible opportunity," she began. And thank you to everyone at Williams and Stone for your support, collaboration, and friendship over these past 5 years. She proceeded to acknowledge key mentors and team members, speaking eloquently about the company culture and her vision for the marketing department under her leadership. It was a polished speech, hitting all the right notes of gratitude, ambition, and team spirit. Then came a shift in her tone, subtle but unmistakable. I'd also like to acknowledge my brother Karl, who joined us tonight. She gestured in my direction, and heads turned. It means a lot to have family here to share this moment. Something in her voice triggered an internal alarm. This wasn't a simple acknowledgement, it was a prelude to something else. Karl and I took very different paths in life, Jessica continued, her smile never wavering. While I was pursuing my MBA at Wharton, Karl was discovering himself through art school. The slight emphasis on discovering gave the word an almost mocking quality. Uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room. I maintained a neutral expression, though my stomach had begun to knot. We make an interesting contrast, I think. The focused achiever and the free spirit, more laughter, less restraint now. My journey has been about setting goals and exceeding them, while Karl's has been more fluid. My face burned as Jessica continued. In many ways, our different choices highlight the range of possibilities in life. Some people climb the corporate ladder, she gestured to herself and her colleagues, while others prefer to remain unfettered by traditional success. The room had grown very quiet now, a collective discomfort settling over the guests as they realized where this was going. I wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor or dissolve into thin air, anything to escape the public dissection of my life choices. Jessica, seemingly oblivious to the tension, pressed on. I sometimes think about nature versus nurture. How two people from the same household can turn out so differently. But then again, her voice took on an edge of false thoughtfulness. I suppose in every family someone has to play the failure. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Failure. She had actually used that word, publicly labeling me as the family disappointment. A few nervous laughs sounded, quickly stifled. Most guests looked anywhere but at me, finding sudden interest in their water glasses or dessert plates. Jessica smiled, a small, satisfied curve of her lips, as she observed the impact of her words. Not that I'm judging, she added, the insincerity palpable. Some people aren't meant for traditional achievement. And that's perfectly fine. My throat constricted, memories flooding back of every dismissive comment, every comparison, every time my worth had been measured against Jessica's accomplishments and found wanting. In that moment, 30 years of accumulated slights crystallized into a single, clarifying insight. Jessica didn't just see me as less successful, she needed me to be less successful. My perceived failure was a necessary counterpoint to her achievement. I considered walking out, sparing myself further humiliation. But my legs refused to cooperate, seemingly frozen to the floor. And something deeper held me in place, a stubborn refusal to give Jessica the satisfaction of seeing me retreat. Anyway, Jessica continued, clearly ready to move past her brief detour into family dynamics, I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity to lead our marketing team into the next chapter of innovation and growth. She launched back into corporate speak, outlining her vision for the department's future. But the damage was done. The room's atmosphere had shifted, an uncomfortable awareness settling over the guests that they had just witnessed something inappropriate and deeply personal. As Jessica wrapped up her speech to polite applause, I sat perfectly still, my face a careful mask hiding the hurricane of emotions beneath. Humiliation gave way to anger, then a cold, clear resolve. Whatever fragile hope I'd harbored for reconciliation had been shattered. Jessica had shown exactly what she thought of me, not in private where family conflicts belong, but on a stage, using me as a prop in her narrative of exceptional achievement. As she stepped away from the podium, our eyes met briefly across the room. I expected to see triumph, or perhaps a belated recognition of how far she had crossed the line. Instead, I glimpsed something unexpected, a flicker of uncertainty, almost fear, before she looked away. I was contemplating a dignified exit when Marcus Williams suddenly rose from his seat and approached the podium. He hadn't been scheduled to speak again, according to the program. Jessica, halfway back to her table, paused in confusion. Marcus gently took the microphone, his expression unreadable as he faced the room. The unexpected development seemed to hold everyone in suspense, including me. Whatever was about to happen, it would determine how this evening would be remembered, not just by me, but by everyone present. The room fell silent as Marcus Williams adjusted the microphone. His expression was calm but purposeful as he surveyed the gathered employees. Jessica hovered awkwardly halfway between the podium and her seat, clearly unsure whether to continue back to her table or remain standing. "Thank you, Jessica, for those words," Marcus began, his tone neutral yet somehow carrying authority that commanded complete attention. "Congratulations again on your well-deserved promotion." He paused, and in that moment I expected him to wrap things up, to move the evening forward and past the uncomfortable scene Jessica had created. Instead, he took a deliberate breath and continued. "Before we move on to the rest of our celebration, I'd like to share something personal with you all." His gaze swept the room, momentarily landing on me before continuing. Something that Jessica's speech brought to mind. Jessica finally decided to return to her seat, her confident stride now slightly hesitant. I watched as several colleagues shifted subtly away from her, creating an almost imperceptible bubble of space. "I come from a family of 4 brothers," Marcus revealed, leaning slightly into the microphone. "Growing up, there was an unspoken but very real competition between us, fueled largely by our father's expectations. The revelation surprised me. Marcus had always presented as the quintessential self-made success, rarely mentioning his family background in company materials or interviews. My oldest brother followed my father into law. The next became a surgeon. The third went into finance," he smiled slightly. "And then there was me, the youngest, who wanted to build brands and tell stories." A ripple of interest moved through the crowd. This was clearly new information for many of his employees. "My father made no secret of his disappointment in my choice," Marcus continued. "Marketing wasn't a real profession in his eyes. Not like law or medicine or even finance. At family gatherings, my brother's accomplishments were celebrated while my early career struggles were politely overlooked. I found myself leaning forward, suddenly invested in Marcus's story. The parallels were unmistakable, though he had obviously ultimately achieved tremendous success. For years, I internalized that judgment. Worked twice as hard, sacrificed personal relationships, chased validation through promotions and salary increases. His voice took on a reflective quality. It took me until my 40s to realize something critical about success. The room was completely silent now, every person present hanging on his words. Success isn't a single path. It's not measured solely by titles or income brackets or the prestige of your alma mater. Marcus's eyes found mine again, holding my gaze this time. True success is building a life that aligns with your values and allows you to contribute your unique gifts to the world. Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her expression a mix of confusion and growing concern. This was clearly not the direction she had expected the evening to take. "Which brings me to something interesting," Marcus continued, his tone lightening slightly. "About 6 months ago, I was browsing through industry publications looking for fresh perspectives on visual storytelling. I came across an article featuring innovative brand identities for small businesses, and one portfolio in particular caught my eye. My pulse quickened. I had been featured in exactly such an article last fall, highlighting my work for a series of local businesses that had subsequently seen significant growth. The designer had captured something essential about each business, creating visual identities that weren't just attractive but meaningful, telling the company's story at a glance. Marcus smiled directly at me. "That designer was Karl Jackson." A murmur went through the room as heads turned in my direction. Heat rushed to my face, but this time from surprise rather than humiliation. "What I didn't know at the time," Marcus continued, "was that Karl was Jessica's brother. I only made the connection when reviewing the guest list for tonight's event." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I was so impressed with Karl's work that I bookmarked his portfolio website. In fact, unbeknownst to Jessica, our creative team has already incorporated elements inspired by Karl's approach into our newest campaign for Horizon Healthcare. Jessica's face had gone completely pale, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. This revelation was clearly news to her, and not welcome news at that. "The point I'm making," Marcus said, putting his phone away, "is that success takes many forms. In Williams and Stone, we value diverse perspectives and different types of intelligence. Creative vision like Karl's is every bit as valuable as strategic thinking like Jessica's. Both are essential to our company's success." He turned to face me directly now. "Karl, your work shows remarkable insight and authenticity. You have a gift for capturing the essence of a brand and communicating it visually. That's a rare talent." I managed a nod of acknowledgement, speechless in the face of this unexpected public validation. "In fact," Marcus continued, "we find ourselves in need of precisely your kind of creative vision. Our digital presence team is expanding, and we're looking for a consulting art director to help reshape our visual identity across platforms." Jessica's mouth actually fell open, her composure completely abandoned. Several of her colleagues were now openly staring at her, measuring her reaction. "I'd like to formally invite you to consider working with us in that capacity," Marcus said. "Not as a favor to Jessica, but because your work speaks for itself. We would be lucky to have your perspective and talents contributing to our brand's evolution." The offer hung in the air, stunning in its unexpectedness. I was vaguely aware of approving nods and interested murmurs around the room. Marcus had not only neutralized Jessica's attempt to diminish me, he had completely reversed it, elevating my work and offering professional validation in the most public way possible. "Think about it," Marcus concluded with a warm smile. "No pressure, no rush. Jessica can put you in touch with our talent acquisition team when you're ready." With that masterstroke, he smoothly transitioned back to addressing the room at large. "And now, I believe the dessert bar is open, and our musicians have promised to pick up the tempo for those inclined to dance. Please enjoy the rest of the evening, everyone." Applause erupted, more enthusiastic than before, as Marcus stepped away from the podium. The jazz trio resumed playing, waitstaff appeared with coffee service, and the formal portion of the evening gave way to more relaxed socializing. I remained in my seat, processing what had just happened. Around me, the atmosphere had transformed. People who had previously offered sympathetic glances now approached with genuine interest, asking about my work and perspective. Business cards were exchanged, connections made. Through it all, I kept glimpsing Jessica, isolated at her table despite it being her celebration. Her expression cycled between shock, anger, and something that looked remarkably like fear. The carefully constructed narrative of her life, with me as the cautionary counterexample, had been publicly dismantled by the very person whose approval she most coveted. The evening had taken a turn that neither of us could have anticipated. And somehow, I knew that our relationship would never be quite the same again. The question was, would it be destroyed completely, or was there a path forward through this public reckoning? The remainder of the party unfolded like a surreal dream. Where earlier I had been practically invisible, now I found myself the center of attention. Marketing executives and creative team members approached with genuine curiosity about my work and process. Business cards appeared from jacket pockets, LinkedIn connections were proposed, and promises of coffee meetings were exchanged. "Your portfolio is really impressive," said one of the creative directors, a woman named Alicia who had clearly checked out my website on her phone after Marcus's speech. "Especially that rebrand you did for the Urban Farm Collective. The way you integrated natural elements without falling into cliches was brilliant." "Thanks," I replied, still slightly dazed by the turn of events. "That was a passion project. They couldn't afford market rates, but I believed in their mission." "That shows in the work," she nodded approvingly. "Authenticity can't be faked." Through these conversations, I kept track of Jessica from the corner of my eye. She remained at her table, a fixed smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes, watching as her promotion celebration gradually transformed into my impromptu networking event. Colleagues would stop by her table briefly, offer congratulations, then inevitably ask, "So, what do you think about Marcus's offer to your brother?" I couldn't hear her responses, but her body language grew increasingly rigid as the evening progressed. When she thought no one was watching, her expression hardened into something between fury and panic. This was clearly not how she had envisioned her triumph playing out. After about an hour of this strange new dynamic, I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment alone to process everything. As I washed my hands, the door swung open and Jessica entered, checking briefly to ensure no one else was present. "Enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. I dried my hands slowly, considering my response. "It's been an interesting evening." "Interesting?" she repeated, moving closer. "You completely hijacked my celebration." "My promotion party, Karl." "Mind?" The accusation was so outrageous that I actually laughed, which only inflamed her further. "I hijacked nothing," I replied calmly. "I sat quietly through your speech, including the part where you called me a failure in front of your entire company. Marcus is the one who decided to intervene." "You must have planned this," she insisted, color rising in her cheeks. "There's no way Marcus just happened to know about your work." I shook my head. "Believe it or not, Jessica, some people actually appreciate what I do. My work was featured in Design Quarterly last fall. Apparently, Marcus reads industry publications beyond the Harvard Business Review." She flinched slightly at the direct hit, but recovered quickly. "So what now? You're going to take his offer just to spite me? Work at my company, undermine my authority?" The question revealed so much about how Jessica's mind worked, always calculating angles, always viewing relationships as potential leverage or liability. It made me sad, honestly, to realize how fundamentally different our worldviews were. "I haven't decided yet," I answered truthfully. "But if I do consider it, it will be because it's a good opportunity, not because of you. Contrary to what you might believe, my career decisions aren't actually centered around you, Jessica." She leaned against the counter, suddenly looking tired. "Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to get where I am? How many late nights, how many sacrifices?" "I do actually," I said. "You're extremely talented and dedicated. No one's questioning that." "But," she prompted, hearing the unspoken qualifier. "But success doesn't give you the right to diminish others," I continued. "Especially not family, especially not publicly." "What were you thinking with that speech?" For a moment, Jessica's carefully maintained facade cracked. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice suddenly smaller. "It just came out. I planned to just briefly acknowledge you, but then I saw you sitting there, looking so comfortable, getting along with everyone." "And that bothered you?" I pressed, genuinely trying to understand. "You always make it look so easy," she said, frustration evident in her voice. "Your life, your choices. No pressure, no expectations. Do you know what it's like to have everyone constantly watching, waiting for you to achieve the next thing, to keep proving yourself over and over?" The vulnerability in her admission caught me off guard. For the first time, I glimpsed the weight she carried, the constant pressure that drove her relentless ambition. "I've never been free of expectations, Jess," I replied gently. "They were just different from yours. While Mom and Dad were celebrating your academic achievements, they were questioning every choice I made that didn't lead to conventional success. Your accomplishments became the standard against which my failures were measured." Jessica looked genuinely surprised. "I never thought of it that way." "Obviously," I said, unable to keep a touch of bitterness from my voice. "You've been so focused on your own journey that you never considered what it was like to grow up as Jessica Jackson's little brother and never quite measure up." She was silent for a long moment, seemingly processing this perspective. "I always thought you had it easier," she finally admitted. "Freedom to pursue what you wanted without the pressure I felt." "We both had pressures," I replied. "Just different kinds. You feared not meeting expectations. I feared never being taken seriously, never being seen as successful in my own right. Jessica sighed, running a hand through her carefully styled hair, dislodging a pin. The small imperfection in her otherwise perfect appearance seemed symbolic somehow. "What a mess," she murmured. "This isn't how tonight was supposed to go." "No," I agreed. "But maybe it's how it needed to go." Before she could respond, the door began to open. Jessica quickly straightened, composure snapping back into place as one of her colleagues entered. The moment of vulnerability was over, replaced by her professional mask. "Jessica, there you are," the woman said. "Marcus is looking for you. I think he's ready to leave soon." "Thank you, I'll be right there," Jessica replied smoothly. She gave me a last, unreadable look before exiting, leaving me alone to collect my thoughts. When I returned to the party, the crowd had thinned somewhat. I was gathering my jacket, planning a discreet exit when Marcus approached. "Karl, do you have a moment?" he asked, gesturing toward a quiet corner of the room. We moved to a small seating area away from the remaining guests. Marcus settled into an armchair with the ease of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. "I hope I didn't put you on the spot earlier," he began. "That wasn't my intention." "It was unexpected," I acknowledged. "But I appreciate the vote of confidence in my work." Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The offer is genuine, by the way. No obligation, of course, but the position is real and your skills would be valuable to us." "Thank you. I'll give it serious consideration." He studied me for a moment before continuing. "You know, I meant what I said about my family. My brothers and I had a similar dynamic to what I observed between you and Jessica tonight." "What happened with your brothers?" I asked, genuinely curious. "We barely spoke for years," he admitted. "After our father died, we were forced to confront the competitive dynamic he'd fostered among us. It wasn't easy, but eventually we found our way back to being family again." "How?" I asked. "After years of that pattern, how do you change it?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "It starts with recognition, acknowledging the dynamic exists and how it's harmed your relationship. Then comes the harder part, forgiveness, not just of each other, but of yourselves for participating in it for so long." "That sounds challenging," I said. "It is," he agreed. "But worth it. My brothers are now some of my closest confidants. Different as we are, there's a shared history there that no one else understands." I considered his words, wondering if such reconciliation was possible for Jessica and me. "Jessica is exceptionally talented," Marcus continued. "One of the most driven individuals I've ever worked with. But drive without balance leads to burnout, and success without meaning leads to emptiness. I've seen it happen too many times." "I'm not sure she'd be open to that perspective," I said carefully. Marcus smiled. "People surprise you sometimes, especially when they're forced to confront contradictions in their own narrative. Tonight was illuminating for Jessica, I think." I couldn't help but ask the question that had been nagging at me. "Why did you do it? Step in like that? You could have just let the moment pass." Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I've built my career on understanding how stories shape perception. Jessica was constructing a story that diminished not just you, but herself as well. Good leaders don't need to elevate themselves by pushing others down." He stood, signaling our conversation was drawing to a close. "Whatever you decide about the position, I'm glad we had this chance to meet. Your sister talks about you more than you might think, though perhaps not always in the most flattering terms." This surprised me. "She talks about me." "Family is complicated," Marcus said simply. "But it's also fundamental. The stories we tell about where we come from shape who we become." With a firm handshake, he left me to ponder his words. As I finally made my exit from the party, nodding goodbye to the few remaining guests, I realized that something significant had shifted, not just in how Jessica's colleagues perceived me, but in how I understood our relationship. The taxi ride home was quiet, the city lights blurring past the window as I replayed the evening's events. Jessica's cruel words, Marcus's unexpected intervention, the vulnerable moment in the bathroom, all of it pointed to a truth I hadn't fully appreciated before. Jessica's apparent confidence and dismissiveness toward my choices might actually mask insecurity and even envy of the freedom she perceived in my life. It was a perspective that would require time to process. But for the first time in years, I felt something shift in our dynamic, a crack in the pattern that had defined our relationship since childhood. Whether that crack would widen into a complete break or become the foundation for something new remained to be seen. But at least now, the script had been disrupted, making space for a different story to potentially emerge. 6 months after that fateful evening at Bellini's, I stood in the elevator of the Williams and Stone building, portfolio in hand, heading to a meeting with the digital presence team. After much consideration, I had accepted Marcus's offer, though on my terms. I would work as an independent consultant rather than an employee, maintaining my freelance business while contributing to specific projects for the company. The arrangement had proven beneficial for everyone involved. The company gained my creative perspective without the overhead of a full-time position, and I enjoyed the stability of regular income alongside the freedom to pursue other clients and personal projects. The only person who seemed uncertain about this new arrangement was Jessica. Our relationship had entered unfamiliar territory after the promotion party. For weeks following the incident, Jessica avoided me entirely, ignoring my texts and calls. I gave her space, understanding that her professional image had taken a hit, and that processing the public revelation of our complicated dynamic would take time. The first thaw came about a month later, when she unexpectedly called on a Sunday afternoon. "The Horizon Healthcare campaign launches next week," she said without preamble. "Marcus mentioned your influence on the design. I thought you might want to see the final version before it goes public." It was a small olive branch, but a significant one. I accepted her invitation to meet for coffee the following day, where she showed me the campaign materials with a professional detachment that barely masked her discomfort. "They turned out well," I offered, reviewing the sleek designs that subtly incorporated elements reminiscent of my style. "The focus groups responded positively," she replied, still maintaining distance through corporate language. After several minutes of awkward small talk, I finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Jessica, are we ever going to talk about what happened at your party?" She stared into her coffee cup for a long moment before responding. "What is there to say? I humiliated you publicly, then got humiliated myself. Karmic justice, I suppose." "That's not how I see it," I said gently. She looked up surprised. "No, I see it as a wake-up call for both of us. A chance to break patterns we've been stuck in since childhood." Jessica's professional facade cracked slightly. "I've been so angry," she admitted. "At Marcus, at you, but mostly at myself. I keep replaying that moment, wondering what possessed me to say those things." "Why do you think you did?" I asked, genuinely curious. She considered the question carefully. "I think I've defined myself by being the successful one for so long that seeing you content with your choices threatened that identity somehow. If you could be happy without following the prescribed path, what did that say about all my sacrifices?" Her honesty surprised and moved me. "Our paths don't have to invalidate each other, Jess. Success isn't zero-sum." "I'm starting to understand that," she said quietly. "But old habits die hard." That conversation marked the beginning of a gradual, sometimes awkward rebuilding of our relationship. We began meeting monthly for lunch, initially focusing on safe topics like work projects and family news. Slowly, these conversations deepened into more meaningful exchanges about our childhood perceptions, the pressure we'd both felt in different ways, and how those experiences had shaped our adult lives. When I accepted the consulting position at Williams and Stone, Jessica's reaction was complex. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" she asked when I told her. "Working together could complicate things. Or it could help us understand each other better," I countered. "Professional proximity doesn't have to mean personal conflict." She seemed skeptical but didn't object further. Our first few joint meetings were tense. with Jessica carefully asserting her authority while I navigated the delicate balance of contributing without overstepping. But over time, something unexpected emerged. We worked well together professionally. Her strategic thinking complemented my creative approach, and our different perspectives often led to stronger outcomes than either of us might have achieved alone. Colleagues noticed the shift. "You two have an interesting dynamic," Alicia, the creative director, commented after a particularly productive brainstorming session. "The sibling rivalry thing actually generates some good creative tension." Jessica had smiled tightly at this observation, but later admitted privately that she was beginning to see value in our different approaches. "Your way of thinking challenges me," she conceded during one of our lunches. "It's uncomfortable sometimes, but probably good for me." This growing professional respect gradually extended into our personal relationship. Jessica began asking genuine questions about my design process, showing interest in understanding rather than judging my career choices. In turn, I gained new appreciation for her dedication and strategic mind. The most significant breakthrough came during a family gathering for our mother's birthday. Traditionally, these events had been showcases for Jessica's latest achievements, with my contributions minimized or overlooked. This time, when our aunt asked Jessica about work, she unexpectedly redirected the conversation. "Actually, Karl just completed an amazing rebrand for a regional hospital network," she said. "Their patient engagement has increased significantly since the launch." The simple act of sharing the spotlight left me momentarily speechless. Later, when I thanked her, she shrugged with uncharacteristic humility. "It's the truth. You did good work." I'm trying to be better about acknowledging that. Now, 6 months after the promotion party incident, I stepped off the elevator into the Williams and Stone offices with a sense of belonging I wouldn't have thought possible. Jessica was waiting in the conference room, deep in conversation with several team members. "Karl, perfect timing," she said as I entered, her smile genuine. "We were just discussing the approach for the new digital campaign." The meeting flowed smoothly, with Jessica and I building on each other's ideas in a collaborative rhythm that had become our new normal. When disagreements arose, they were professional rather than personal, focused on the work rather than our history. After the meeting concluded, Jessica lingered as others filed out. "Lunch today?" she asked. "I wanted to run something by you." Over salads at a nearby cafe, she revealed that she'd been offered a position at a competing firm, with a substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. "Are you going to take it?" I asked, surprised by my own mixed feelings about the possibility of her leaving. "I'm considering it," she replied. "But there's a complication." "What's that?" Jessica met my eyes directly. "I've gotten used to having you around. Working together. Being siblings again. If I leave Williams and Stone, we lose that regular connection." The admission touched me deeply. "We'd find other ways to stay connected, Jess. Our relationship isn't dependent on working together." "Isn't it, though?" she asked, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "We've never been good at the personal side of being siblings. Work gives us structure, common ground." "Maybe that was true before," I acknowledged. "But things have changed." "We've changed." She nodded slowly. "I never thought I'd say this, but you've become one of my most trusted advisors, Karl. Not just creatively, but in how I approach leadership. You see people in a way I'm still learning to." The compliment was unexpected and deeply affirming. For most of our lives, Jessica had positioned herself as the one with wisdom to impart, with me as the perpetual student. This recognition of what I brought to the table represented a fundamental shift in our dynamic. "Whatever you decide about the job offer, we'll figure out how to maintain this," I promised. "We've spent too many years as strangers to go back to that now." Jessica smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "When did you become the wise one?" "I've always been wise," I replied with a grin. "You just weren't listening." She laughed, the sound free of the competitive edge that had characterized our interactions for so long. In that moment, I realized how far we had come from that humiliating night at Bellini's, how a public low point had ultimately opened a path to healing that might never have emerged otherwise. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been difficult conversations, old wounds reopened before they could properly heal, moments of regression into familiar patterns. But the effort had been worthwhile, leading us to a relationship based on mutual respect rather than comparison and competition. I had learned that success truly does have many definitions. That validation comes not from meeting others' expectations, but from building a life aligned with your own values. Jessica had learned that achievement without connection creates a hollow kind of success, that vulnerability requires more courage than perfectionism. Together, we had discovered that family relationships are not fixed narratives, but evolving stories, capable of new chapters and surprising plot twists when we're brave enough to move beyond the roles we've been assigned or assumed. As we walked back to the office, Jessica nudged my shoulder lightly with her own. "Thanks for not giving up on me," she said quietly. "Even when I gave you every reason to." "That's what family does," I replied. "The real kind, anyway." The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, and our relationship would continue to require work and conscious effort. But for the first time, I felt confident that whatever challenges arose, we would face them as allies rather than adversaries, siblings in the truest sense of the word. Have you ever experienced a relationship transformation like Karl and Jessica's? The journey from competition to connection can be challenging but rewarding. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be struggling with family dynamics. Remember that it's never too late to rewrite the story of your relationships. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to break harmful patterns in your own life.